Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to my channel, and today we're going back to Power Rangers for another review. So, some time ago, I put a poll out on my channel asking you guys what season of Power Rangers I should take a look at next. And the majority of you actually wanted me to take a look at Power Rangers Super Mega Force. Now, that season has been on my list for quite a while. So today we're going to take a look at Turbo. So let's dive right into the deep end and see if this show is as cringy and as terrible as everyone says. Now, the first thing I need to talk about is this. A lot of people may be confused about the sudden introduction of Justin and the extremely sudden exit of Rocky. Now, this confusion would only be there if you only watched the shows, as this season doesn't actually begin with episode 1. Instead, it actually starts here. Yeah, this is the first season to have a movie serve as its introduction, showing us who Justin is, though the movie acts like we've seen this character many times before, and the reason why Rocky is no longer a Ranger, though it's a terrible reason for the character. But we do still get some good moments from the movie, which I'll talk about later. However, even though this was the first fan-hated season of the series, I want everyone to know one thing. The entire series was made for kids. If this season is too childish for you, that is the reason. However, as I was scrolling through some research, I learned that even people who were growing up in the 90s didn't enjoy it. And I can't lie in saying that I kinda understand where they're coming from. However, my personal view of the show is a little bit different than everyone else's. Let me explain. Yes, this season is ridiculous in its plots and stories. I mean, there are episodes where the Rangers go up against cars brought to life, they're baked into a giant pizza, which, fun fact, actually comes back up in Forever Red, and an episode where they face off against a literal band of monsters. However, what many people didn't seem to realize at the time was that its parent show was basically a comedy show. So take that how you will. And it's also why they tried writing comedy for the villains, because every time we cut back to them, it makes the comedy between Bulk and Spike look like Abbott and Costello in comparison, while the main villain does a terrible impression of Rita. Now, of course, I exaggerate. No, I don't. But let's get into the true meat and, in my opinion, the best part of the show, the Rangers. Now, this one will be a little different than usual since the Rangers were swapped out halfway through the season. But the in-universe reason for it was that the Rangers are out of high school and are now in their greatest adventure into the world of college and exploring the world. And the real reason was that JDF and Catherine wanted to pursue other career options, so they took out all the original Rangers. So I'm going to be a little bit brief when talking about the veterans and a little bit more in depth when talking about the new cast. But just know I will talk about the veteran Rangers when we get to other seasons. Tommy, played by Jason David Frank, is still the leader of the team and, randomly enough, is more into racing than paleontology, which we all know he eventually studied in. But I feel like this is more of the show being a relic of its time. Plus, race cars are just cool. Adam, played by Johnny Young Bosch, is still very fun to watch. Though it feels kind of weird that after high school, he has like 15 different jobs across his 19 episodes, including a stunt performer, a soccer coach, and a magician? But hey, the guy's got to pay the bills somehow. Then there's Tanya, played by Nakia Baris, who went to work at a radio station, which was actually pretty interesting. as the villains left a bomb at the radio station one time, and she had to let the other Rangers know by broadcasting it out over the radio. And super obvious what she was trying to say. And finally, Catherine, played by Catherine Sutherland. Boy, it must have been easy for her on set. Has probably the best post-graduation job I have seen from any of the characters in this show. A teaching assistant. I'm not gonna lie, that is pretty interesting, and I could see all 4 of these guys having that job after graduation. I'm not kidding, half the time this felt like home for them in the other seasons, and this helps them keep an eye on things that are going on in the school, as well as keeping an eye on the newest Ranger. And on that note, let's get into the new cast. Justin, played by Blake Foster, is the newest member of the team, starting with the movie as the new Blue Ranger. Now, while most people left the show because of his inclusion, it's not as bad as everyone thinks. Yeah, he's kind of annoying, but when have kid actors been really believable in shows? Okay, you have a point with those, but this is a show from the 90s, and they weren't taken as seriously. Yeah, it makes no sense why he's in high school here. Okay, they do say that he scored high on his placement test, but he never shows any skill or intelligence in the season to reflect this. And yeah, his unaltered voice when he's morphed is very distracting and makes it very obvious who it is. But I feel like if they did alter the voice, it would have somehow been more distracting for kids. Also, he's always the quickest to act when Divatox enacts a plan. And he was made to appeal more towards kids, though that didn't even need to happen. Remember, this was the 90s. They wanted to show kids and younger teens more than adults. Also, I found out when I was writing this that Blake didn't even audition for the role of Justin. He was just picked by the producers when he was on the set for a different movie. So, get a load of this. Steve Cardenas went to Saban Entertainment saying, "I want to pursue other career opportunities." Then the higher-ups looked at each other on set and said, "Gosh, now what are we going to do for a Blue Ranger?" Then one of them saw that another movie was being made next door and said, "We need that kid to play our new Blue Ranger." And Blake was cast just like that. So yeah, it's not all his fault. He was very underprepared for the role in both the movie and the show, as opposed to all the other actors. Next up is, Theodore J. Jarvis Johnson.
Please, just call me TJ.
Okay, that'll do. Played by Selwyn Ward.
Selwyn Ward, first black leader of the Power Rangers.
Okay, what was that? Who takes Tommy's role as the Red Ranger. Now, he doesn't get a lot of development in this season, and he seems to be into baseball for like 2 episodes, and everywhere else in the season, he has other personal interests. But he does show his skills as a leader in his first appearance, as he goes to save Tommy, showing why he's a good choice for the successor of the Red Ranger. Next, let's look at Cassie, played by Patricia Jolie, who is a band player, I guess? She's really into music, both in terms of singing and playing, and she's very forward-thinking, usually speaking what's on her mind. Her character bio also says that she's rather defiant, and that can get her into trouble. However, we don't even see that version of her in the show. I guess because she's a ranger, we can't see her get into trouble, but she doesn't even show this kind of attitude before she's chosen. But she's also shown to have a kind, sisterly nature throughout the season. Now, I do have more to talk about with her, but that will come when we get to Lost Galaxy. Now, let's take a look at Carlos, played by Roger Velasco, who is a soccer player and the first soccer player ranger. Yeah, you all thought Connor was the first one to do this, but nope. Now, we see him have a budding relationship with Ashley since their first episode. Yeah, for the successor Rangers, Carlos and Ashley were the first to be developed and have adventures before being Rangers. Even down to having a fight scene against the Piranhatrons, and when they were in civilian mode before actually becoming Rangers. And on that subject, let's talk about Ashley, played by Tracy Lynn Cruz, who is a bit of a sassy girl with a heart of gold, like most other Yellow Rangers, with a positive outlook on life. She also seems to have a bit of a crush on Carlos, as, in their first episode, she asks Carlos to walk her home with a flirty smile on her face. And she's the only Ranger who has a very consistent storyline, outside of Carlos, where she learns how to fix cars. And that was very fun seeing this story come back for at least one other episode. Now, let's get into the two sixth Rangers of the season. Yeah, let's talk about the Blue Senturion, voiced by David Walsh, and the Phantom Ranger, played by Ali Afsar. Now, I'm going to refer to both of them as the season's 6th Rangers, even though the Blue Senturion is more like a Ranger ally. Blue Senturion was the first to show up in this season, delivering a message to Dimitria from the future, foreshadowing the events of the next season. However, even then they didn't get it right. He says the message comes from the year 2000, but Countdown to Destruction occurred in 1998. However, one reason for this was that the writers were worried about the falling ratings, so they had the date as 2000 just in case. The other reason is actually a fan theory, that originally the date was 2000. But with Blue Centurion going back in time, this altered history, changing the date as well. And I find that second reason very intriguing. And while the Sentai version does a much better job at making this hilarious, I do like how he even talks about monsters making growing violations.
You are in violation of intergalactic codes. Stop or I will be forced to restrain you. Playing loud music without a permit is a violation of code 41028.
Like, is that really a thing? You need a permit on other planets to use a giant mechanical robot or to play music across a whole entire city? Now, the Phantom Ranger in comparison is a much better character for me, because he's got a very cool design and cool powers. Plus, there's so much mystery surrounding this character, which caused several different theories on who he could be. With two of the biggest theories I found being that he's either the collective souls of every previous Ranger, or Billy Cranston. Yeah, one of the biggest theories on who was behind the mask was David Yost himself, which I did talk about in my Power Rangers in Space video. But I think when looking at this character, it's better not knowing who he really is, and seeing what everyone else thinks. Though, while I was writing this, I found that the Boom Comics of 2022's Power Rangers Universe series tells that the Phantom Ranger is a Morphonaut from about 10,000 years ago. Now, while it is cool and allows us to get to know a backstory for him, I completely hate this. It takes away the fun of having theories, and in my opinion, it's much more fun to have a mystery that is never explained. Next, I'm going to go over Dimitria, played by Carol Hoyt, and Alpha 6, voiced by Catherine Battistone. Now, most people have already pointed out how these two are bad characters and mentors. And I can't say I disagree. The series was written so that Zordon had to leave to fight evil elsewhere, and so we needed a new mentor to maintain the status quo. However, for the first half of the season, Dimitria is so annoying, only asking questions.
Dimitria is from Inquirus. Inquirus, like inquire. She doesn't give answers, she asks questions.
Okay, whatever, Alpha, but the biggest thing about a mentor is that they need to help the Rangers in some way. Instead of being straightforward and answering their questions, she just keeps asking more and more questions, and they start to feel more like confusing riddles than actual advice. It's like they took scripts from previous Power Rangers seasons and just took every single line from Zordon out except for his questions. Now, while this makes the Rangers figure things out for themselves, it makes Dimitria less memorable and more annoying. And Alpha?
What am I, invisible?
Man, what the did they do with his voice? First of all, Alpha 5 was a clumsy robot with a heart of gold. Yes, could be sometimes a little annoying, but someone I feel like I would want to be friends with. And this Alpha has a stereotypical New Yorker Brooklyn accent and keeps going,
Yo, yo, yo.
Yeah, this alone makes the show feel very dated and very cringy. And the second thing is that Alpha 6 here is more annoying than Alpha 5 was in the original. Now, I'm not saying I hate Alpha 5, far from it. He's actually one of my favorite Ranger allies. But most of his jokes were very hit or miss. But most of this Alpha's jokes are misses. In fact, he, or would it be she in this situation, doesn't even give a single joke or one-liner. She just keeps giving out exposition and explains what Dimitria is trying to say. Now, I know I should also mention Bulk and Skull here, as they're still in this season, but they're literal monkeys for half the show. And, like the last two seasons, they're joined by Jerome Stone, with the same straight man, funny man skits occurring in every episode. But I'm going to get more into them when we get to Zeo, as they're a bit dumbed down in this season, and anything I can say about them here can also be said for them in other seasons. However, the one thing I will actually say is that their comedy works where others fail. Speaking of bad comedy, let's talk about the villains. Now, the biggest part about villains in Power Rangers is that they are the make or break element of the season. Aside from the Rangers, of course. If one doesn't work, the whole season struggles. And these guys are terrible compared to every other Power Ranger villains. Captain Mutiny, Vipra, Lothor, Furious, Moltor, Prince Vakar, all of them are somehow more threatening than these guys. Divatox is dressed way too risque to be the main villain, with her constant screaming and a terrible catchphrase. Viva la Diva! Elgar is the biggest attempt at comedy, but his jokes never get a laugh. Except for maybe one or two, but that's not the point. He's supposed to be the dim-witted second in command, but he's just way too annoying to even be ironically funny. On top of that, Porto's outfit makes him look like a huge, gigantic marshmallow, and Rygog looks like the inside of a gosh darn car! However, while I do despise these villains, I will give some credit to the actors. Divatox, for example, was played by both Hilary Shepard Turner and Carol Hoyt throughout the season. Turner portrayed the villainess in the movie, but before shooting, she discovered she was pregnant, so she couldn't do the show for a while. So, Hoyt was brought in as a temporary replacement. That was really interesting to learn about. She's still a terrible character. I mean, the person who never gets a serious line and is always acting like an unfunny comedian is the one who actually wins this season? No way. That's ridiculous. Now for the suits, there's honestly not much to talk about. I mean, I love how the visor is outlined by the grille of a car, which is very unique, but aside from that, these suits are pretty standard. Heck, there are even tire-like parts on the gloves that aren't utilized in any way. Do they increase their speed, or are they an aesthetic choice? There's also Lightning Cruiser and Stormblaster, who are sentient cars. Yes, you heard me correctly. Sentient cars! With very interesting personalities. Despite the fact that they're, well, frickin' cars. In all honesty, I kinda see them as parallels to TJ and Justin. Red being like an older brother to Blue. And the Zords are just cars. Also, having the Megazord switch out parts was meant as a joke in the Sentai, but it's cool that it became a standard in other seasons. Nothing else to talk about here, so let's move on to the episodes. First, let's look at The Whole Lie. This episode was interesting in the same way that something like a clip episode has a good story. It doesn't mean anything, but you do get an understanding of... No, there's nothing else to it. I mean, the moral of the episode includes the dangers and downsides of lying, which is pretty important for kids. And the real downside of lying that comes from the monster is interesting, and it's pretty nice and kind of funny the way they break the spell. Not much else to talk about with this episode, but I thought it deserved a mention because it stayed in my head when I was watching the season. So to make up for this, let me add another episode that meant little to nothing in the whole season. Wait and See. Now, this one was more about the life of big-time stars and appearances. When chosen to be the lead in a ballet performance of The Nutcracker, Kat is bullied for her appearance and refuses to eat anything. That's weirdly something a lot of supermodels apparently go through, always being criticized for being too quote-unquote fat, and they end up just starving themselves. Also, the monster of the episode is very boring.
You can't make me feel bad about myself anymore, Numbor!
That wasn't even the reason he beat you. You didn't know what his powers were. Making you feel bad wasn't even part of the equation. Then there's Trouble by the Slice. What the shit do I even say about this one? It's basically just a terrible story concerning Divatox getting amnesia. Now, I've liked these stories in other seasons. King for a Day, Power Ranger Punks, When is a Ranger Not a Ranger, and I've Got a Spell on Blue are all great stories centered around this kind of concept, usually turning a ranger to the other side. You can really have a lot of fun with a story like this. Here, though, it's just Divatox walking around and working at a pizza place. However, there is one thing that people do seem to remember about this episode.
I've had just about enough pepperoni and mushrooms today.
We're here to toss your salad.
Okay, maybe two. Then there's the episode The Robot Ranger, which is one of the better episodes of the season. Yeah, the episode where we get a send-up to Invasion of the Body Snatchers, quite possibly one of the goofiest films ever, is one of the better episodes. Who'da thunk it? But in all seriousness, I do enjoy this episode because it keeps making us second guess what we know, and this idea was also so much fun. A second team of Rangers? This could open up so many possibilities. Now yes, they go out to help Zordon on Eltar, but this means we could potentially see them again in the next season. You know, adapting this movie into Power Ranger episodes, and using the Robot Rangers to team up with the Space Rangers. You know, having them fight together one last time. We never see them again, do we? Ugh, seriously, Imagine how cool it would have been if we saw these guys come back again next season for a full-on team-up episode. What a complete waste of potential. But now let's get to the actual good episodes, starting with Passing the Torch. This one was the episode that switched out the entire cast for the new kids. And it's nice that we see TJ and Cassie's introduction, with them immediately hitting it off and becoming friends very quickly. Plus, I do like how part 1 is mostly Tommy getting captured by the villains and being trapped in a 60s Batman killing device. However, the one thing that definitely doesn't work for the first part is just seeing Divatox in bed like this. This scene was so awkward for me, and it doesn't help that this line was said in the weirdest way.
You better watch out, Tommy boy.
Oh, why does that sound too adult for this kid's show? But it is pretty sad that part 2 is the last time these four will ever see each other in the entirety of the Power Rangers timeline. Though it is also a lot of fun for me that we get an extension of the Power Rangers universe in a way that we haven't seen before. The leaving of these 4 original Rangers and bringing in a whole new team of heroes. Even still, I get teary-eyed when I see the veteran Rangers give their blessings for the new kids, and this being the final time we see them.
I wouldn't be standing here today, TJ, if it weren't for your courage and strength. I choose you to lead the team as a new Red Ranger.
This two-parter is a nice ending to the original team's story, and a good farewell to these characters we've come to know for over 200 episodes. Finally, we got the episode that many consider to be the best in this season. And I do have to agree, Chase into Space is the best episode I'm talking about today. Mostly because it's the end of this terrible season. Now, of course, it's amazing for more reasons than just that. For one, both the Turbo and Rescue Megazords are destroyed within 5 minutes of each other. That literally makes me feel terrified every time I see this. Even more terrifying is that both Megazords are taken out in part 1, meaning that the Rangers are practically defenseless against the villains. It's also kind of surprising we don't see this in any other season with a 2-part finale. Another amazing thing about this is that this is the first time the entire second part is a land battle between the Rangers and villains. Whoosh! Start taking notes, Legendary Battle! We see the Rangers battling the villains with all their might, with even Stormblaster and Lightning Cruiser coming in to help. And such great camera angles are made during the battle. However, nothing seems to be working as the villains keep gaining ground. I'm also not joking when I say, this battle is so epic, and it's so much fun to watch because it always gets me to the edge of my seat. Plus, every time I watch this and see the Rangers forced to retreat into the command center, I get so scared for the fate of the world. And the battle just keeps getting worse and worse for the Rangers, which makes me get more on the edge of my seat every time I watch it. And I do enjoy the build-up to the next season, with the Messenger name-dropping Dark Spectre, the Nasada spaceport, Zordon being captured, and the Rangers going into space. However, I do still tear up when I see Justin watching his friends leave Earth. But we get one heck of an epic stinger at the end.
To be continued next season, Power Rangers in Space.
Ooh boy, I always get the chills when I hear that. So this review has been a lot more negative than a lot of my others, but there is still a reason for it. Remember at the start of this show when I said that Car Ranger was a comedy show? Well, it gets even more insane when you hear this. That show was actually made as a parody of the Sentai genre, which explains why the Rangers ride in go-karts, the Megazord pretty much being 5 cars literally smashed together, and why the Rangers keep using their cannon against giant monsters. So, what happens when you take a comedy show and try to turn it into a serious, somewhat dark show? Well, you get a complete mess. Any and all stories they had for the show attempted to take a darker and more mature look at the Power Ranger universe. Like changing up the entire cast and having the villain win in the final episode. But because of the parent show, this was almost impossible to take anything from Turbo seriously. That's why this season was so despised, and that's why it felt like the near end of the Power Ranger legacy. Anyway, thanks for watching, you guys. Be sure to give this video a like if you want to see more videos like it. Leave a comment. Let me know what season you want me to take a look at next. I do really want to get to all the seasons. Subscribe if you haven't, and ring that bell for notifications. Also, check out my Discord server. It's a great place to just talk with me and other people about the videos that I put out, and it's where I'll be putting up updates every once in a while, and even putting up some additional footage and questions and all that stuff. Also, follow me on Twitter as well at prnerd_official, and check out my TikTok as well. I don't post there too often, but I have been for certain items. Also, follow me on Instagram at PowerRangers_nerd. I put up the artworks for all of my speed paint videos on there for you guys to check out. Also, check out my Patreon as well. I am starting out on there and starting to put up a lot more of my older videos there too. May the power protect you all, and I'll see you guys next time. Take it away, Rangers!
Let's go to work. Shift into turbo.